Hello and welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Capitol Hill correspondent Nancy Cordes. Well, Capitol Hill is abuzz today because in just a few hours, Democratic leadership plans to introduce a resolution of disapproval against Congressman Joe Wilson. He's that congressman who stood up at the president's speech. Well, I don't know if he actually stood up, did he? But he did yell out, "You lie," in the middle of the president's speech. And here to talk to us about what's going to happen today is Jill Jackson. She is our congressional producer extraordinaire, making her debut here on Washington Unplugged. Thanks for being with us, Jill.
Thank you.
So this has the potential to turn into quite a spectacle.
It does. This afternoon, the Democrats are going to introduce a resolution on the floor reprimanding Congressman Wilson for shouting "You lie" during the president's joint address. It's been a very troubled start leading up to this, but last night Democratic leadership decided they would go ahead with it. The resolution just punishes his conduct. They say it's not about a speech, but there'll be a full debate on the floor this afternoon, and we can also expect, we just learned that Congressman Wilson will speak on the floor to defend himself, and then you also will have the Democrats trying to make the point that this was incredibly rude, but they want to keep it in the decorum realm rather than anything political.
Right, and of course we just ran into him on our way over here, and he told us that he does not plan to apologize, whatever he says on the floor, and he said he's still planning what he's going to say on the floor. He is not going to apologize. Now, what changed? Because last week we heard Speaker Pelosi say, "We just want to move on." We heard President Obama on 60 Minutes saying, "We should just move on." So how come all of a sudden the Democrats changed their minds and decided that they were actually going to push for this resolution?
Because of pressure from Democratic leadership. Majority Whip James Clyburn actually has been pushing to bring this resolution to the floor. He met with leadership last night, made his case. He told me he didn't think it was a difficult case to make, but he feels that this kind of behavior is absolutely unacceptable, wants to make sure it never happens again.
Right, it's all about not setting a precedent, right?
Exactly.
That you can get away with this kind of thing. Now, the House Rules Committee, I thought this was very funny, actually very helpfully put out a guide for us this morning about what you can say and what you can't say on the House floor. For example, you can call the government oppressive. You can call officials half-baked nitwits, colorful example there, but you can't call the president a liar or a hypocrite or intellectually dishonest. What's the difference?
Well, there really is not much of a difference. However, they are basically trying to, it sounds like it's sort of catered to this specific situation, saying this is not okay, but also, once again, they're marking the way forward to make sure that these kinds of outbursts don't happen in Congress.
So choose your insults wisely is basically what they're saying. Okay, do we think that any Republicans will vote in favor of this resolution today?
It's very unlikely. This is, if anything, uniting Republicans even more than they were before. And if you remember, House Republicans have spent a year being pretty solidly voting as a bloc against Democratic proposals like the stimulus. Only a handful ended up voting for the energy bill. This, if anything, is a rallying call again. And it also shows that they're coming off of these town hall meetings from the August recess. They feel like their voices need to be heard, and Wilson is becoming a bit of a hero in the Republican Party.
Obviously, this is not going to do wonders for bipartisanship.
No, and it's already quite a toxic environment, especially over on the House side. And you're also going to hear today Republicans bringing up, well, what about ethics problems with Charles Rangel? What about Jack Murtha? These are, where we've already seen press releases saying, where's the resolution against Rangel? So they are going to also, in this, try and show a bit of what they see as hypocrisy.
Right, exactly. If you're going to air our dirty laundry, we're going to air yours. You've got some ethics problems of your own, and this looks a little bit unfair. Well, it should be interesting. We'll keep an eye on it. Jill Jackson, thank you so much for joining us to talk about it today.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on now. Teddy Kennedy received a copy of his new memoir, A True Compass, on the morning of his death. The book's editor, who worked closely with the senator, says he doesn't even know if Kennedy actually got a chance to see the final product. From New York, I'm joined today by Jonathan Karp, the book's editor and publisher. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So obviously this is a thick book. I have not made my way all the way through it, I will admit, but it's beautifully written, and I'm wondering, did he start writing this before he became ill?
Yes, he'd actually been working on it for years. This began as an oral history project, and he began talking to a historian, telling the story of his life about 5 years ago at the University of Virginia. But even more amazingly, he took personal notes beginning in 1960, so for nearly 50 years. He was actually observing things, and he was a very careful observer and a wonderful writer.
And obviously that takes so much discipline. It takes a certain kind of person to take notes like that all throughout your life. You know, what struck me is that here's someone who had basically a public megaphone all of his life. If he ever wanted to share a thought or a sentiment, he could. He had that public platform. So when he sat down to write this book, how difficult was him to decide, okay, what do I actually want to say that I haven't said before?
I asked him, what do you think is the most important message of the book? What would you like readers to take away from this? And it came down to one word: perseverance. In fact, we even thought about calling the book Perseverance, but it was too hard to spell. But he didn't quit. He didn't quit in his political life. He fought for health care his whole life. He fought for an increase in the minimum wage for decades. He spent about 30 years trying to get peace in Northern Ireland. And he didn't quit in his personal life. And I think we saw that most dramatically in the past 15 months when he battled this illness. He knew it was terminal, and he never gave up. And I spent a fair amount of time with him, and he never complained. He took it one day at a time, and he was always optimistic. When he got the prognosis, the thing that made him the angriest was that the doctor didn't seem to be telling him to fight it.
Right.
It was basically just get your things in order, and that was not in the Kennedy DNA.
Right, and he actually writes in the book about how they got similar prognoses for both his son's cancer and his daughter's cancer, and they fought both of those cancers head on and actually won in both of those situations, and that is what gave him the strength and the courage to fight this battle. I'm wondering, since you say you spent so much time with him while he was writing the book, was it a cathartic experience for him? Was it an emotional experience for him? Because he did write about some very difficult episodes in his life, like Chappaquiddick, which he really hasn't spoken about too much before.
It was at times emotional, but mostly it was fun. He was a joyful man. You may not believe this, but he loved to sing. And I remember one time at lunch he was singing Roy Orbison songs. Yeah, he was a lot of fun, and he just would tell us story after story. One of my favorite stories in the book was about, it's just a paragraph in the book. It was about, he was swimming with Jack Kennedy. It was 1962. They were in Florida, and they were having a debate about the Civil War. And Jack said, I think we should call Dick Russell, the senator from Georgia. He'll know what battle it was. And it was New Year's Eve, and they called him at the Senate office. And Dick Russell was there, and the answer was the Battle of Chickamauga. And what was amazing about the story was, A, that Jack Kennedy knew that Dick Russell would be in his Senate office on New Year's Eve, but even more significantly, that these were the kinds of brothers who would argue about the Civil War in a swimming pool on New Year's Eve.
It's funny, you talk about singing. There's so many members of Congress here. If you ask them their favorite memory of Teddy Kennedy, they'll say, oh, it was the time that we were singing at his house, or oh, it was the time that we were singing at a restaurant. So obviously he enjoyed doing it, and many other people enjoyed doing it with him. I want to point out that the caucus room that's directly behind me here in the Russell building actually was renamed last night. There was a vote on the Senate floor last night to rename that caucus building the Kennedy Caucus Room, not only after the late Senator Kennedy, but also after his two brothers who were senators here in this building as well. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the significance of being here in Congress where his brothers had come before, and how you think he would have felt that just a few short weeks after his death, there are already rooms being named after him. I'm sure it's not the last thing that will be named after the late senator.
Well, it was never about Ted Kennedy, but I can tell you this, he loved the Senate. He loved it with all of his heart. He said that it gave him goosebumps every time he saw the Capitol, and he in fact told his wife Vicki that if he ever stopped feeling that way, she should get him out of the Senate. He described it as a chemical place. And he said that he could see the change that occurred in his fellow senators after they'd been there for a couple of years. He saw them becoming bigger and more principled. He believed that the Senate changed you. The Kennedy family is the only family in American history ever to send three brothers to the U.S. Senate. So they are historic for that reason alone.
Impressive. Well, Jonathan Karp, the editor and publisher of True Compass, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your insight. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
And that's it for Washington Unplugged. Thank you so much for joining us. You can join us every day at 12:30 on CBSNews.com. For now, I'm Nancy Cordes at the Capitol. See you later.